Imagine a man hailed as a literary genius, celebrated by politicians, journalists, and intellectuals alike, a symbol of true rehabilitation. But what if I told you this very man, who charmed his way into high society, was secretly one of Europe's most brutal serial killers? Jack Unterweger wasn't just writing about crime. He was committing it. Between book signings and TV interviews, he strangled at least 11 women using their own brass. And the most shocking part? While investigating the murders for the media, he was criticizing the police for failing to catch himself. This is the terrifying true story of Jack Unterweger, the killer who fooled the world. How did this one man fool the world and commit some of the most horrifying crimes in Europe and the United States? Johann Jack Unterweger was an Austrian serial killer who murdered in multiple countries, including Austria, West Germany, Czechoslovakia, and the United States. Initially convicted in 1974 for a single murder, he spent time in prison writing extensively. His writings gained recognition from Austrian intellectuals, who viewed his work as evidence of rehabilitation. After considerable advocacy, Unterweger was granted parole in 1990. Upon his release, he gained fame as a writer and journalist, but soon resumed his killing spree. In June 1994, following his conviction for 9 additional murders, Unterweger committed suicide by hanging in prison. Jack Unterweger was born on August 16, 1950, in Judenburg, Styria, to Theresa Unterweger, a Viennese barmaid and waitress, and Jack Becker, an American soldier she had met in Trieste, Italy. Some accounts describe his mother as having worked as a prostitute. While pregnant with Unterweger, his mother was imprisoned for fraud but was later released and traveled to Graz, where he was born. In 1953, after his mother was jailed again, Unterweger was sent to Carinthia to live with his grandfather, a man known for his rough nature, who involved his young grandson in stealing farm animals. Unterweger spent much of his youth in and out of prison, having been convicted 16 times between 1966 and 1974. Most of these convictions were for theft-related crimes, though he was also found guilty of pimping and sexually assaulting a sex worker. As a result, he spent the majority of those 8 years in prison. In 1974, Unterweger killed 18-year-old Margaret Schaefer, a West German woman, by strangling her with her own bra. Unterweger was apprehended shortly after the murder, but attempted to justify his actions during his trial. He claimed that, while killing Margaret Schaefer, he saw his mother's face in her eyes, hoping to garner sympathy due to the trauma of being abandoned by his mother during childhood. However, this defense did not sway the court, and he was swiftly sentenced to life in prison in 1976. During the 1980s, Jack Unterweger was seen as a model prisoner, portraying himself as a reformed individual. His transformation appeared to demonstrate that no matter the crimes someone had committed, it was possible to turn their life around. Once in prison, something seemed to profoundly change within Unterweger as he began to dedicate himself to writing. Once illiterate, Unterweger learned to read and write in prison, and soon became prolific. He penned poems, short stories, novels, and plays. In 1984, his book In Station Zuchthaus, Terminal Prison, earned him a literary prize. His autobiography, Fegefeuer, Purgatory, quickly became a bestseller and was even adapted into a film, further enhancing his reputation as a rehabilitated man. Unterweger's remarkable literary output soon caught the attention of Austria's cultural elite, who were captivated by the apparent transformation of the once violent criminal into a talented writer. Austrian historian and talk show host Peter Hummer was deeply moved by Unterweger's autobiography Purgatory, describing it as authentic and akin to a real cry. Similarly, Elfried Jelinek, who would later be awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature, praised the book for its clarity and great literary quality, further solidifying Unterweger's reputation as a reformed and talented writer. He was so gentle, recalled Alfred Coleridge, a magazine editor, after visiting Unterweger in prison. He and others felt compelled to advocate for his pardon. This sparked an unexpected campaign aimed at recognizing Unterweger both as a talented artist and as a rehabilitated individual. Intellectuals and government officials soon rallied around the cause, calling for his early release. A statement signed by supporters declared, "Austrian justice will be judged by the Unterweger case," underscoring the importance they placed on his redemption. Thus, in 1985, a movement was formed to secure early release for Unterweger. Many viewed Unterweger as a symbol of the belief that a person could overcome their past. As Peter Hummer explained, Unterweger represented the intellectual's hope that by articulating one's issues, they could be resolved. He added, "We were eager to believe in him." This desire to see him as a reformed man fueled the push for his early release. Unterweger was released on May 23, 1990, after serving the mandatory 15 years of his sentence. Following his release, his autobiography Purgatory became part of the curriculum in Austrian schools, and his children's stories were broadcast on Austrian radio. Unterweger also became a television host, where he discussed topics related to criminal rehabilitation. Additionally, he worked as a journalist for the public broadcaster ORF, ironically reporting on the very murders he would later be convicted of committing. Just 4 months after his release, a prostitute was discovered dead, strangled with her own underwear, eerily similar to the murder of Margaret Schaefer. The number of victims quickly grew. Over the next few months, 7 more women were murdered, all following a disturbingly similar pattern. The victims were prostitutes, strangled with their own brass, and their bodies were discarded in wooded areas. Each of these killings echoed Jack Unterweger's first known murder. Authorities later uncovered that, in addition to murdering 7 women in Austria in 1990, Jack Unterweger also killed a young woman named Blanka Bikova in Czechoslovakia. The Austrian victims Brunhild Masser, 39, Heidi Hammerer, 31, Elfried Schremp, 35, Sylvia Zagler, 23, Sabine Moitzel, 25, Karen Eroglu Sladky, 25, and Regina Prem, 32, were all killed within a year of his release, and all were strangled with their brass, following a consistent and chilling pattern. Despite his violent past, the newly freed Unterweger appeared to have evolved into a prominent literary figure in Austria. He became a cultural sensation, giving public readings, staging his plays, and working as a journalist. Remarkably, Unterweger positioned himself as a key reporter investigating the recent string of murders involving prostitutes. Audaciously, he even interviewed Vienna's chief of police and wrote newspaper articles about the very killings he was secretly responsible for. In 1991, Unterweger was hired by an Austrian magazine to write an article on crime in Los Angeles, focusing on the contrasting attitudes toward prostitution in the U.S. and Europe. While in Los Angeles, he checked into the notorious Cecil Hotel. During his stay, he connected with local law enforcement and even participated in a police ride along in the city's red light districts, giving him insider access to the very world he was secretly preying upon. While Unterweger was in Los Angeles, 3 prostitutes, Shannon Exley, Irene Rodriguez, and Peggy Booth, were brutally assaulted, beaten, sexually violated with tree branches, and ultimately strangled with their own brass, in a manner strikingly similar to the murders he had committed in Austria. By this point, the rising number of murders had caught the attention of authorities on both sides of the Atlantic. Investigators in Los Angeles began to notice that the timeline of the prostitute murders aligned with Unterweger's presence in the city, prompting increased scrutiny of his activities during his stay. Unterweger fled the United States, moving first to Switzerland, then to Paris, and eventually returning to Miami. It was in Miami where authorities finally caught up with him in February 1992, bringing an end to his international run and beginning the final chapter of his grim story. Unterweger was extradited to Austria on May 27, 1992, and charged with 11 murders, including 1 in Prague and 3 in Los Angeles. A jury convicted him of 9 murders by a 6-2 majority, which was sufficient for a conviction under Austrian law. Psychiatrist Dr. Reinhard Haller, who conducted a psychological evaluation of Unterweger, diagnosed him with narcissistic personality disorder and presented his findings to the court on June 20, 1994. 9 days later, on June 29, Unterweger was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. That night, in Graz Carlisle prison, Unterweger took his own life by hanging himself with a rope fashioned from shoelaces and a cord from his tracksuit pants. In a grim and symbolic act, he used the same knot that had been found on all of his strangled victims. Jack Unterweger's story is one of manipulation, charm, and pure evil. He fooled society, the media, and even the justice system. A man who lived a double life, one as a celebrated writer and another as a serial killer. His life raises questions about trust, rehabilitation, and the darkness that can hide in plain sight. Could someone like Jack Unterweger deceive the world again? The chilling truth is, it's possible. Thank you for watching. If you found this video informative, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true crime stories. Let us know in the comments. Do you think Jack Unterweger's deception was a once-in-a-lifetime event, or could history repeat itself?